Hello everyone, my name is Daniel Pyatt and I hope that you are all well, keeping nice and safe. Welcome to 25 exercises that every martial artist should know. This is part 3. Today we're going to look at isometric holds in particular. We're going to look at a variety of them that work all different parts of our bodies and we can incorporate these exercises into our regular routine, as is always the goal. So you will find in this video in particular that there are some exercises that are far easier and some that are far harder, so there should be something for every difficulty level. And that's the goal, that you can have at least a couple of exercises from each video that you can take and incorporate into the routines that you're already doing. Please put down in the comments below as you're watching the video which of the exercises you find most helpful, which ones you're definitely going to try at home. I'd really love to hear from you to find out which ones that you're finding most beneficial, and particularly if you've watched our other videos, please feel free to do the same. So without further ado, I'm going to get into exercise number 1 for today. So exercise number 1 is a C-sit. A C-sit is an isometric hold specifically targeting your abs, and is effectively a held sit-up position. So let's have a look at this. We've already talked about when we did sit-ups about the need to make sure that we're within a range of tension for when we're doing a sit-up and that we don't have unnecessary periods of relaxation. The C-sit basically just keeps us in this state indefinitely, theoretically. So we start with our feet close together or just slightly apart, but flat to the floor, and then you want to come back so that your arms are cupped around my knees. I sit back until my arms are straight, and then this is roughly the C-sit position. So when I take my arms away, I'm now in my first isometric hold. Now the arm position, you can do a lot of different things with. You can just have your elbows up and just hold this position, and so just maintaining this posture for a period of time can just work as a single exercise on its own. If you're doing this, I would advocate that this particular hold you want to do for longer periods of time, so approximately like 60 seconds at a time before a break. One thing that you can add to this to make it more challenging is to have C-sit rotations. So from here we take our arms and we're going to drop our elbow down to the side, bringing our opposite elbow up to the centre. And then from there we come over, we go in the opposite direction, and so that we go through that rotation action whilst we maintain the C-sit. So like I say, this exercise I would do for about 60 seconds. What I prefer to do is to do it for at least 30 seconds in a stationary position, and then do the rotations for the remaining 30, and doing multiple sets of this will obviously increase its effectiveness. So that's the C-sit. So exercise number 2 is a personal favourite of mine. I call this inch walking because you're going to be in an isometric hold and you're going to walk forward an inch at a time. This exercise is good to do over a slight flat distance. Usually in the dojo I would say students have got to start in one position and get so far up the dojo hall. For the crazy brave, they can do the full length of the dojo. The first thing you have to do with this particular exercise is get into the position, and then you do the walk. I will say a few things before I demonstrate it. First of all is the intention of this particular exercise is different to say like a lizard walking, for example. And I jokingly say to students that the intention is not to try and be Spider-Man when they're doing this. They shouldn't be reaching forward in a huge way. Okay. So effectively what we're going to do is we're going to go into a press-up position, but we're going to be an inch off the floor. So I'm going to start demonstrating this horizontally, and then I'll show it forward. So we go into our press-up position, but we start from the floor. So we're going to start from the floor, and our goal with our hands underneath our shoulders is to lift just an inch off the floor. So this is our position that we're going to hold and maintain. From here, we're going to walk forward on our hands. You will only be able to take very small movements and maintain the isometric hold. So from here, this is your intention to always stay about an inch off the floor. And you can add, after set distances, sets of press-ups before continuing on your journey, wherever that may be. Again, I'll just show this at a different angle. So we start on the floor, we get the hands right underneath the shoulders, feet nice and close, and then push up. So this is our starting position. And then we walk. Then we can add our press-up component. And then we walk. I love this exercise because it is really challenging over a really short distance. So trying to do several meters, 2-3 meters of this is good to do as a single rep, and then you can walk back slowly and do it again, or you can just lie there and wish you'd not started. So inch walking, great exercise, strongly advocate doing it. Particularly good, like I say, if you've got not particularly very much space, you can go forwards and then go backwards as well. Exercise number 3 is what I call a star hold. This is best done for shorter periods of time because of the position of your hands, this is a lot harder hold to maintain. So as opposed to where we did the C-sit, which can be done for about 60 seconds, and we did the inch walking exercise, which is usually maintained over a longer period because your arms are quite close to your body. The challenge really comes in the act of movement. This exercise is usually done for shorter periods. So I would advocate doing this initially if you're really struggling in 5-second holds, but then aiming to get to at least 10 seconds and then building that up to 15, 20, etc. So that's your goal. So let's be realistic about that before we start. It's very simple. We're basically going to start in a star position with all of our limbs at an angle away from our body this time. And we're also going to do this on our fingers, because one thing that's really important for us to develop as martial artists, as we'll see, is grip strength. It's one of the single most valuable skills that we can develop, but most overlooked skills that we can develop. So grip strength and grip power is really essential. Without it, you can't really seek to dominate and adequately control your opponent. So it's important that we do develop the strength in our fingers for striking, but also for gripping. So both of those aspects are important, and this is one exercise that develops the strength in our fingers, but without putting unnecessary load on our fingers at this stage. So we start in this position, and we want to take our arms out to the 4 corners. If I imagine my body was sitting inside a square, I'd be taking my limbs out to the 4 corners. The further I stretch my arms away, the more difficult this will become. So you need to find the position that you're most comfortable with. And like I say, your goal is to be onto your fingers and to the balls of your feet onto your toes. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to hold for 10 seconds, and then we relax. So from this position, we go up. It's not as important in this exercise that you maintain just 1 inch off the floor. You can come up much higher if you wish to make it a little bit easier. And then we relax. And so with this particular exercise, you can see, because my body is so stretched out, you can see that the stress this creates causes the body to shake. And that's because this particular hold is far more demanding on the body. One more time. And we rest. So this particular exercise is a really nice one for developing both finger strength, but also for developing not just your muscles themselves directly, but also working on tendons, ligaments, all the sinews that connect each aspect of our each muscle group, because this is working your entire body, your entire core, all at one time. So it's a particularly good exercise. I really enjoy it. Students hate it, which again is another reason why I like it so much. Exercise 4 and 5 today have to start with safety warning. So we're going to look at neck bridges. We're going to look at exercise 4 will be forward neck bridges. Exercise 5 will be inverted neck bridges. These are particularly important for development in the strength of your neck. Why is this important? Well, one of the most universal targets of all martial arts is to attack the head and neck, particularly through methods such as chokes and strangles, shimowaza. It is important that if you're practicing shimowaza, in whatever art it is that you practice, that you do so by developing your neck in order to receive chokes and strangles. There's no point picking up a strangle on YouTube and going, oh, that looks really cool, let's try it on my mate, if they've never thought about actually developing the strength of their neck in any way, you'll find the result, first of all, is that you're far more likely to create injury through the action of practicing the strangle. What you'll also find though is you may end up inadvertently discovering false positive results with strangles. And what I mean by that is, if you're practicing with somebody who's never ever developed their neck in any way, you may find that they will tap and they will submit incredibly quickly, sometimes just out of fear, not out of necessarily even there being a genuine strangle threat there. And so it is important that you don't fall into that trap, in no different to the same way that you could with joint locks. If you don't develop your body in order to receive and to take those joint locks, you will very often find yourself in a scenario where your opponent will submit or tap far more than somebody who is in a state of active resistance and who's got it in their mindset at that stage not to submit. So it's important that you develop your body to deal with both of those two things. But I will just I do want to say a few things about this. First, you've got to be realistic. Your goal is to develop the strength in your neck. You will not be able to resist the strength of a correctly applied shimewaza or stranglehold. That is not the goal. The goal is to simply develop the strength of our neck to give us maybe a couple more seconds in an effective strangle that might be the difference between us ultimately escaping or us ultimately submitting. If your opponent is going to correctly apply a stranglehold, I do not care how much neck conditioning you've done, it is not going to make a difference. And in that regard, shimewazas are really almost the king of all techniques, because it doesn't matter how big and strong your opponent is, they will work when they are applied correctly. If you've got somebody who really wants to resist a joint lock, they may very well resist to the point where you have no choice but to break it. Whereas it doesn't matter how big and strong you are, the result with a choke and strangle is you'll go to sleep. So we have to have that in the back of our mind. So this won't prevent them working, but it will maybe give you a few extra seconds. Because we're doing exercises directly onto the neck, it is particularly important that more than any other exercise that we've done, that you moderate this exercise, that you differentiate it, and that you do it to your actual ability level. There is no point whatsoever going gung-ho with this exercise. You will cause yourself injury, and that's not the goal. So it's really important that you build this up. I would advocate, if you're first starting this, that you really do maybe even begin on your knees, if necessary. And make sure that you initially always use your hands to moderate the amount of force and the amount of pressure that you get. So that's really important. And I would also say this is an exercise that under no circumstances whatsoever could ever be done with people under the age of 18. This isn't specifically for adults who are serious about developing their body. So without further ado, let's have a look at the forward neck bridge. So we're going to go back to a position we've seen before, the Hindu squat position. I'm going to have my feet nice and wide. My goal in this one is I'm going to bring my forehead to the floor, and I'm going to use my hands initially to moderate the strength and the amount of weight that ultimately comes forward and is going to be applied into my neck. So I bring my forehead to the floor, I keep my hands flat and make sure I've got a good base. Now this phase, I want to stress that because my forehead is south of my knuckle line, as I'm getting into position there isn't any stress on my neck. It's only when I start to rock forward and I contract my arms that I'm going to start to take the weight, transfer it from my hands into my head. So from here, as I rock forward, now the weight is into my neck, not into my hands. So from this position, initially you just want to rock backwards and forwards through just by rocking on the balls of your feet and using your hands to very, very carefully control and to moderate the amount of force and the amount of stress that you put into your neck. Once you're happy with that, and that probably won't be the first time you do it, and I wouldn't even advocate doing it the first time just to try it. After you're comfortable and happy with that, then your objective is to take your hands away. Like I said, you might want to start this, and I'll just show you this first, not on your feet. So if you're a little bit less confident, start with a really wide kneeling position. And this is just going to massively lower the amount of weight that you've got. Then you can take your hands off and then just work in this position. Another way that you can moderate this is the extent to which you roll forward. Going over a much smaller range with small movements will maintain the isometric hold, okay, which is perfectly sufficient. Going over a broader distance is going to increase the effect on your neck. So, and you'll feel that very, very easily as you do it. So you can moderate and do a smaller rocking action initially. So then the full exercise, like I say, that you're ultimately working towards is to get to this position. Like I said, initially there is no weight in my neck at this point. As I bring my head forward, now it's in, and the goal is to take your hands away. This is the exercise as we would normally practice it, but if you're starting out, I would have your hands in a ready position so that if at any point during the exercise you feel like, yep, I've reached my limit, then you can immediately stop. And it's important that you do that. Don't try and do this for long periods of time initially. Do this for short, more frequent periods, maybe 5 seconds at a time, 10 seconds at a time, but no more than that initially. That's your initial goal, just to begin to develop the strength of the neck. So that's our forward neck bridge. We want to be able to do the inverted one as well. This one's again a little bit more challenging and a little bit harder to differentiate. So I would always start with the forward neck bridge before moving on to this one. So this time we're going to go back to a position again we've seen. We're going to go back to our bridge, and as before, we start with our feet nice and close to our butt. We're going to bring our hands up to our shoulders, elbows pointing towards the ceiling, and then we come up into our bridge. So from here, we're going to take my forehead and again rest it onto the floor. So I've still got my hands here so that I'm controlling the amount of weight in my neck. And my goal then is to bridge forward, like so, just on the top of my head. From here, I'm using my hands at the moment just to support, but your goal again is to take those away. And again, to increase the magnitude of the force that you apply as you become more comfortable with the exercise. With this one in particular, I prefer still to have my hands into the position, not so much to maintain, to put any force through my hands. I prefer to have my hands in position for that one, to make it easier to make sure that my body doesn't begin to rock side to side. I want to make sure that I'm doing this in a very straight line. I don't want my neck twisting as I do it. So, as again, just as a final point with those, if you're going to attempt to get either of them, either the forward neck bridge or the backward neck bridge, make sure that you do it safely, particularly important, perhaps more so than any of the other exercises we've looked at. So, exercise 6 is an oldie but a goodie. We're going to just look at a really simple exercise, but one that I would advocate that you include, which is a wall sit. So your goal with this is really, really simple. Have your feet nice and wide. You're going to bring your back against the wall, and you want to drop down so that your legs are in a perpendicular position, so that your back is flat to the wall. You can moderate how you use your arms for this, but you hold and maintain this position for either as long as you can until you get to fatigue, or for 60 seconds or so. So again, this is an exercise that you won't do for a shorter period of time because it's not that demanding. But over the period, this does build in difficulty. It's also a good one to do just if you're having like a family quiz night and you're trying to ruin your relative legs. So a wall sit, really, really good exercise. Try to make sure that your knees are perpendicular over your feet. You want to avoid this kind of thing happening. And it's a really good exercise just to maintain an isometric hold with the legs. So exercise 7 for today. We're going to go back to talking about our fingers and about how we develop the strength for this. And in contrast, like I said in the first exercise we did, the star lift, that the weight and amount of force that is applied to your fingers can be reasonably easily moderated through the position of your hands. This exercise, in contrast, is more high magnitude. You're going to have far more proportion of your weight through your fingers in this exercise, but that isn't even the most difficult bit about it. But just as a proviso, that is a point. So you can vary this exercise if you don't wish to do it through your fingers by doing it, say for example, on your fists, and you'll still be able to get the rest of the exercise, but it won't be as much stress on your fingers. Okay, and this is an L sit. It's also known as finger lift, and again, this has got lots of different names. So it's a really simple exercise in its premise, but again difficult to do for long periods of time, but worth doing and worth practicing. You can also change the difficulty of this by having your legs out straight or having your legs in a seated position. The most difficult way, the goal is to have our legs out straight, and that's what's going to create the L position for our body. We're going to take our fingers, and your finger positioning is important with this when you first start. One of the reasons people struggle with this is because of poor hand placement. Your hands aren't going to be the back level of your bum, and certainly not behind. You're not going to lift yourself up in that way, not without rocking backwards. So you want to have your hand position just sort of about halfway down the thigh, but then I'd probably come back about an inch. So then you want your fingers in a nice spread position. You're going to have your feet together, and your goal is really simple. You're going to lift your legs and your bum off the floor and hold. We're going to aim to do this for 10 seconds. Okay, so from this position, pick a spot in front of you, keep your eyes on that, so you're going to keep your spine nice and straight. You want to try to avoid curling forward, and then we come up. And then down. So that's our goal, that's what you're trying to do. Again, this is a particularly difficult exercise because you have got most of your full body weight going through your hands. But actually this exercise is just as much about maintaining your core, maintaining that posture. Other ways that you can do it, like I said, is you can do it in a seated position. So you can do it here and just elevate your bum. And if you can't do your fingers, you can also do your fists. So you can be, for example, here, lift, and your goal is just to lift your feet just off the floor, and just that action of lifting up in your core is a key part of the exercise. What quite often happens is people will lift with their hands, so they'll lift their butt off the floor but won't get their feet, or they'll lift their feet but they won't lift their butts, and so you've got to lift and elevate everything together. So it's a nice challenging little exercise for you to have a go at. To do it for really long periods of time is really difficult, and kudos to all of those of you who can, but it's one that's worth practicing for short periods of time and trying to build. So exercise 8, which is our final exercise for today, and this is a bicycle crunch, and this exercise you're basically holding in a crunch position for a long period of time and simply doing bicycles. So this is good again for your core, for your abs in particular, and again I would advocate with this exercise looking for this to be one of the holds we'll do over a longer period of time, maybe about 60 seconds or so, and by including the movement of your legs, you're also engaging your full abs from the top to the bottom, and sort of making sure that you're maintaining that hold effectively. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our back on the floor, and remember we've already talked about crunches, that actually the way to engage in the core is to try and elevate the shoulders. So that's what we're looking for. We then bring our feet up and we start our bicycle rows. So you can change and moderate the speed for this. Some people prefer to go slightly faster, some people prefer to go slower. That doesn't really matter, it's a personal preference. But the key is that I'm going to keep my shoulders up off the floor, and that's going to make sure that I maintain the contraction in my core whilst I'm doing my bicycles. And again, I would aim to do this for about 60 seconds or until you simply can't do any more. And then to do multiple sets is a good thing to do with that exercise. So that's it. Thank you everybody for watching the video. I hope you found it useful, and please don't forget to put a comment down below as to which of the exercises you found most helpful. I'd really love to hear about it. If you like this video, you can subscribe to get more just like it by either clicking the icon in the bottom right hand corner or just below looking at the description. We do videos as often as I can, particularly during the COVID crisis. I'm trying to do some every day, so if you like this video, please have a look at the videos that we've already done, and I hope you find them useful. Please stay safe everyone, and as always, I will see you in the next video.